Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Now recently I went on a vacation and the only handheld that I brought was my PlayStation Vita. And some people were kind of surprised to hear that because obviously they know it plays Vita games, but not everyone is aware that it also plays PlayStation 1 games, PSP games, and PSP mini games. So today I'm going to show you the games that I keep on my Vita, as well as share some tips for getting even more games on it. And we're going to briefly talk about the PlayStation TV. Let's take a look. All right, well, here is my Vita, and as you can see, it's packed full of stuff for me to play while I'm traveling. But we're going to start with the PlayStation 1 games. We're going to start with Legend of Dragoon. Now, this was Sony's answer to the really popular Final Fantasy VII, and I have to say, this is a really cool RPG. If you miss those old, turn-based RPGs, you'll definitely want to check this out. I like to keep a mix of styles and games on my Vita, and for that reason, I have Parasite Eve 1 and 2 installed on there. And I like these games because they're very different than what Square was doing with other stuff back on the PlayStation 1. This is a survival horror / action role-playing game, and it's just really cool to have, again, on the go. Another series I try to keep on pretty much every portable I can, and that is Metal Slug. This is Metal Slug X for the PlayStation 1, another classic. Here's another one of my favorite kind of hidden gem series, although people are starting to talk about it, and that is Klonoa, and the version that is on the PlayStation 1 is really good. And again, it's nice to have a bit of variety when I'm traveling, because if I'm in the mood for a 2.5D platformer, this one fits the bill. Some people don't know that you can play Japanese PlayStation games on your Vita. There's a lot of them in the store, and you are looking at Gaia Seed right here. Really cool to be able to get this and play it for way cheaper than it costs for the physical version. If you dig deep enough, there are some really quirky Japanese titles in there as well. This is the Firemen 2. How do I describe this game? Basically, you play as a fireman, and it's almost like a shooter where you're shooting water to put out fires and also save people. It's a pretty fun game. Here's another Japanese import I downloaded from the store, and that is Sonic Wings Special. I gotta have my top-down shooters. Oh yeah. So let's switch over and talk about PSP games. This is where things get a little bit interesting and where I'm gonna give you a bit of a tip so that you can get and find more of them. But to start off with here, we have God of War Chains of Olympus. This was a PSP exclusive for a while, although they did a remastered version for the PlayStation 3. Really well-made game, super fun to play, and it works flawlessly on the Vita. One thing that might surprise you, it certainly did me, is that not every PSP game is actually listed in the PlayStation Store on your Vita or your PlayStation 4. Because I knew that they released Burnout Domination, but I couldn't find it anywhere in the store on the Vita. And it turns out that there are some PSP games that you can only still buy if you use a PlayStation 3. And then what you do is you hook your Vita up to the PlayStation 3 and you can transfer it over. It seems kind of weird. I suspect it's a licensing issue because it seems like a lot of the PSP games that you can't find are the ones that maybe have a licensed soundtrack. So it's a really good thing to know. And here is Burnout Domination. Now I was very excited to find this game because this was, at least for a little while, a PSP exclusive, although again they ported this, I believe, to the PlayStation 2. But a really fantastic arcade racing game. You guys know I love the Burnout series, and so they're not really making them anymore, so every chance I get, I want to have it on my favorite system so I can always play it. But again, I want to reiterate, the way you get this is by going to the PlayStation Store on the PlayStation 3, doing a search for Burnout. You'll see it there, you can buy it there, and then you connect your Vita to that. It's kind of weird, but it's not too bad. That's also how I had to get the Activision hits remixed for the PSP. I originally bought this years ago, And again, couldn't find it originally on the Vita, but you have to go to the PlayStation 3, and that's where it shows up. So just be aware. Next, I want to talk about PSP Minis. I don't think many people remember what PSP Minis were, but basically they are Sony's answer to digital-only games you would download through the App Store. These are games that, to my knowledge, never got a physical release, but thankfully the Vita does support them. And like every other platform, you have some good ones and some bad ones, but I'm going to highlight some of the best PSP Minis here. As you can see, this is very similar to the arcade game Cubixx, although what I like about it is that it has the third dimension to it. So you basically have to cut away up to 50% of all the different sides to expose the core to move on to the next level. It's actually pretty fun. Here's a great game called A Space Shooter for $2. Love that name, because that's exactly what you get here. Basically a top-down shooter. Very fun, a little slippery on the controls, so it can be kind of frustrating, but it's fairly forgiving. It's got a great story too. Check it out. Here's a kart racing game called Hercules Chariot Racing. Now, fans of Mario Kart are going to feel right at home here. It's got pretty tight controls and it's fun, it's creative, looks good. Now, I guess Europe got this actually on the PlayStation 2, but for us, we either had to have it on the Wii or on the PSP. So it's cool again that the Vita plays it. Here's another fun little shooter called Ace Armstrong versus the Alien Scumbags. This game's got a great art style, a lot of humor to it, and some serious difficulty. This is a really tough game, so if you like these kind, definitely check it out. Here is a first-person shooter called N.O.V.A. Think of this as a fairly generic Halo clone, but the reason I want to talk about this game is because when you originally ran this game on the PSP, you of course did not have a second analog stick, and that really sucks for first-person shooters. However, the Vita has a secret PSP settings menu that you can access if you hold down the PlayStation button for just like say 1 or 2 seconds. It brings it up and then you can configure the controls. So for instance, you can assign different buttons to the right analog stick. It completely changes this game and many others that need that second analog stick. So what about Vita games? Well, I'm currently playing Ys 8. Man, what can I say about this game? I mean, it's the first Ys game that I've basically just sat down and like, okay, I'm gonna play this game from beginning to end. I have never done that before, and I've heard this is a really good one to get started with, but I have to say, I'm blown away by it. I mean, these graphics look amazing on the Vita. I see a game like this and I'm like, why is Sony not promoting this handheld? It looks amazing. It plays great. So really enjoying Ys 8. And here's a game that I basically just always keep on my Vita because I think it's an absolute masterpiece, and that is Velocity 2X. This is a game that's unlike anything I've ever played. Or I guess you could say it's like a bunch of games mashed together, but perfectly. It's a 2D platformer, it's a shooter, and it just, I don't know, the controls are just absolutely amazing. It's a little bit on the complex side, but I really love it. This is one of my favorite like current gen games, and there's a physical version of it. And then on a whim, I saw that Drive Girls came out, and it's a physical game on the Vita. And how do I describe this game? It's a Japanese game. It's a beat 'em up. It's skimpy anime girls with transforming cars. It's really weird, really bizarre. I would say it's not amazing, but when these games come out and they're relatively cheap on Vita, I typically pick them up because they're kind of fun. And you never know, I mean, it might be good for an afternoon. I want to mention that all of the gameplay footage that you see in this video was actually captured by me on the PlayStation TV you see here. The PlayStation TV is basically the Vita minus the touchscreen and also the display. But you can still use the same Vita memory cards, so you get all of your backups, your games, your saves, all of that stuff. And also you can play physical games too. This is a really great opportunity for people to get into playing on the Vita for fairly cheap. I mean, in the US, you can find these for as little as $25. And the way the controller works is it just simply syncs with a standard PlayStation 3 controller here. So the only thing to keep in mind is that not every single Vita game works with it, because some of them do need the touchscreen, but I found that the vast majority of games do work with it. So as you can see, there is a lot that you can play on the PlayStation Vita. I love it so much. I think the thing that I really run into the most with it is just space. Right now I have a 16 gig memory card in there, and it is just not enough. I'm constantly deleting stuff to put new stuff on. I'd love to know what is on your Vita and what are some of the hidden gems that you have found in the PlayStation Store. Love to know. Please post a comment down below. As always, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care. Now, I know some of you are saying, hey, why didn't you talk about custom firmware? Because that is a thing that a lot of people do with the Vita. And I think that's a subject for perhaps another video. I'm certainly not avoiding the issue. I think it's definitely an interesting thing to take on, because that opens up the Vita and the PlayStation TV quite a bit. So maybe I'll tackle that in a future video. Speaking of future videos, you're going to want to be subscribed to my channel, because I release 2 new videos every single week. All right, guys, thanks for watching.